But in lieu of any Resi person, oh no, there's a Resi person standing out there.
Pushing them in.
Yeah.
Go rogue, go rogue.
Marker.
You think? Just go for it?
Yeah, just go for it.
All right, well then we're going to go for it. Welcome to the best panel of the day. This is the diagnostics panel. If you don't want to listen about diagnostics, get the hell out of the room. I have with me an incredible group of panelists. You will get to hear and meet with them shortly. But basically, it's David from Arch Ventures, Nat from VC23, and Wooder, who I've been on a panel with before, from Illumina Ventures, and me from Little Graybird. Our goal in this next hour is not only to paint a picture of the landscape of investing in diagnostics, but actually to answer the question that I think most of you are in this room or want to have answered. How many of you are in this room are people looking for money? Raise your hand. That's what I thought, the majority. So the thing we're going to try to do is trying to give you information as to how to extract money from these guys. Right? Because that's really what you're looking for. And so to do that, what we have planned is about 35-40 minutes of us talking. We're going to try to keep 20 minutes open for Q&A. Ask them nasty questions, not me. I'm moderator, so I get treated special. What we're going to do to start is I'm going to let each of my fellow panelists introduce themselves, a little bit about their particular investment focus and their organization, and then I'll start to ask the nasty questions. So if we don't mind, I'm going to start with Wooder.
All right. Hi there. Thanks for having me. So I'm Wooder. I'm with Illumina Ventures. As you might guess from the name, we have something to do with Illumina. For those of you who don't know, Illumina is a manufacturer of DNA sequencing instruments. You might assume that we're Illumina's venture arm, which we are most definitely not. So what's the connection? On one hand, there's a personal connection. Some of us come from Illumina. We were at Illumina for a long time prior to starting Illumina Ventures. But more importantly, Illumina is our anchor LP, as the anchor LP to our current fund, meaning that they were the first to commit to our fund. We're still investing out of our first fund, which we raised about 3 years ago. It's $230 million in size. Some of that money comes from Illumina, the majority from outside investors. So we're not a corporate VC. We have no strategic remit. Illumina is a limited partner, and our focus is really is on financial returns. So why did Illumina invest in us? It's because of our focus. It's also why let us use the name. Our focus is on genomics, anything to do with genomics. Our background is in genomics, and we invest in life science tools companies, diagnostics, therapeutics, and other industries as well, but we like that to be a genomics angle, and we do interpret genomics in a very broad sense of the word. So that's our focus. We like to invest at the Series A or B stage. Sometimes we do seed rounds, sometimes later. And typical check size at that stage is around 5 to 10 million.
Great. David?
Yeah, hi. David Cruikshank with Arch Venture Partners. I'm based in Chicago, which is where Arch started. We were actually the first commercialization arm of the University of Chicago, and did a reasonable job of creating some startups out of that institution as well as our National Lab. And we're able to kind of take that show private and have been raising funds ever since. We are a very early stage venture capital firm. We like to invest in companies when they're maybe not even a company yet, kind of early stage technology, kind of a PI that's got a great idea, kind of innovative science, and then large market opportunities. So kind of technology platforms is what we like to invest in, and then pull together teams that can then commercialize that technology in a large market. So we've been doing it for over 30 years now. We have offices around the country. In addition to Chicago, we also have them in the Bay Area, in Seattle, Austin, Texas, more recently an office in Dublin, Ireland. The size of the funds have been getting really large. So we start off with a $9 million fund. The fund we're raising right now, actually just about finished off right now, is Fund 10, about $650 million. So we can certainly we start with the companies at the very beginning stage and then continue to invest in them throughout their life cycle in the portfolio, and then hopefully help them out with the exit to the IPO or acquisition. We're mainly healthcare investors nowadays, but we still do some of the physical science work that we have in the past. And in the life science space, I think we're pretty well known in the therapeutics area, but we also do companies in instrumentation, diagnostics, and aesthetic space. So I think that's a quick rundown. I guess like check size for us, so we get started like as small as like 50K if it's like kind of a proof of concept, and then kind of goes upwards, 5 million, 10 million, 20, kind of just depends on what the company needs. So that's good.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nat Bryn, partner of VC23 and Vital Venture Capital, two venture groups that have invested in total about 42 million over 10 years. So we are very early stage, much like David. We'll invest when there's IP filed and an idea. We can help build a team as well around a company. Our bite size is smaller, between $500,000 and $2 million, but typically around $1 million to start. We'll add to that position to build up maybe a $3 to $5 million position in a company. We focus on IP-centric tools and diagnostic technology platforms. We also do sort of anything in biotech that isn't drug development. So that runs the gamut. It's all over the place, from synthetic biology to Ginkgo Bioworks is here in Boston, a SynBio company, Twist Biosciences, a DNA synthesis company. I think we're together. Yeah, that's right.
I'm visiting Twist in Geneva next week.
Okay.
For totally different reasons. So I'll look at how they're spending your money.
Good. They're already
Actually, public money now.
They're already public, so they're spending anyone's money.
Spend your money.
So we invested in a myriad of things. We've only done one therapeutic company. It's a unique situation in gene therapy. But we look at lots of different diagnostics, and we have structures such that we have a venture group, and so we're not sort of limited to our fund maturity time frame. We can be an investor for a short period of time, or we could hold something for 20 years if we want.
Great. Before I begin, there are some more chairs scattered around, but if you guys want to stand, I understand that too. Tom Miller, founder of Graybird Ventures. We're a rather young venture firm. We only made our first investment in 2016. We have 5 investments now, 2 in Germany, 2 in the United States, and 1 in China. By the way, if you want to really have an exciting time, try these days to invest in a company in China. It's interesting. But we are rather unique. We're the only company I have found that only invests in diagnostics. That's all we do. We also have the penchant for early stage firms. We will do seeds, but not out of the fund. When we do seed rounds, it's out of us. So we will personally write checks for seed funding. 2 of our companies got their start that way, and then if they grow enough that we think will expose our investors to that risk, then we'll have Graybird come in. Our smallest investment was $3 million. Our biggest one is about to be 20. We are at all 5 companies the largest investor. So when we find a company, we jump in deeply. And we tend not to be very passive. So if you want a passive investor, don't take our money. But enough about us. More interesting thing is to talk first about the investing landscape in diagnostics. And to do so, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to have Nat start off. And now, what do you think about the world of investing in diagnostics these days? I mean, it's a good place to be, a bad place to be. You run scared every time you see it. What do you think?
I think it depends on the opportunity. We like diagnostics, in particular, technologies that enable diagnostics. Organizations that have a new technology that will enable application in various diagnostic tests. So a broad-based technology in that regard. And I think there are opportunities that abound like that. So many new technologies can be applied to diagnostics, but as you all probably know, it just takes the right team, a fair amount of work, whether you're going the LDT route or FDA approved route. But there's so many companion diagnostic opportunities that are emerging and will continue to emerge over the next 10 years. I think it's a good time to do diagnostics, yeah.
David, do you agree with that?
So our approach to diagnostics is to typically not actually invest in diagnostics, which is kind of a strange thing to say at a diagnostic conference or a panel. But we like to invest in kind of the research use only tool, and then there's like a back end into diagnostics from that. And so we're looking for enabling technology that can disrupt some kind of research space. And provides something for research that is a large market opportunity in the research space, and then that technology can then be leveraged in a diagnostic application, and that can potentially happen after an acquisition or after an IPO or something like that. So that's the way that we kind of think about diagnostics typically. There are certainly case points where we go I won't take the word, but we'll get a little crazy, like and hang from chandeliers, and invest in a diagnostics only play, like in the case of like a Grail, which is going after really like a really big target, which is cancer screening. But typically we'll go after diagnostics as more of a back end play.
Yeah, not going to be terribly originally. I think the panel's a bit biased because we have a very similar strategy. We're primarily a life science tools investor actually, so we invest in tools that have the potential to turn into a diagnostic or drug development platform, and that can sort of spin off a sort of a whole series of products potentially. And also in our case, the few diagnostic companies that we have invested in, 4 out of 17 so far, they all tend to have a sort of a genomic readout, so I think it's a special case. And in terms of whether it's a good time to invest, I think, especially in sort of in our industry, it is a very good time to invest. And we've had a couple of very high-profile exits this year with Guardant and Adaptive, and prior to that, Natera and Ariosa. So they're all sort of diagnostics with a genomics readout. Very exciting time to be in that space.
So I think from my point of view, I'll say that I agree with my co-panelists, but I will also put a but. The diagnostic space is, in comparison to the therapeutic space, an area where true innovation and capital efficiency is very important. And when I say true innovation, we maintain a database of diagnostic startups. That database contains about 1,000 companies in it right now. It's a couple more than 1,000 as of yesterday. For example, if I met a liquid biopsy company here today, and I said, "Who are your competitors?" And he said, "Well, we here are the 8 companies that we think compete with us." And I said, "Our database has 222 liquid biopsy companies in it." Those 222 liquid biopsy companies are using either whole blood, plasma, either exosomes, DNA, methylated DNA, RNA, microRNA, proteins, everything you want, and they're looking at every single cancer you want, and for everything you can think of, from either early stage detection to recurrence of disease. And so it's an incredibly complex space. And it's a space where, and I can understand why some of my colleagues on the panel say we like to invest in tools first, because it gives you a lot of room to go to places. You're not as narrowly confined. We look at the same thing. If you say, we have a diagnostic for this one single narrow disease, we're going to look hard at whether we're going to go anywhere near you, because things don't go always as planned. And if you have a platform, if it doesn't work well in this direction, you can take it in another direction. and other directions are often necessary. The other tricky thing about diagnostics, I will say, is that when we look at exits, it's and it would be interesting to see if you guys agree with me here. We actually mapped out a whole bunch of diagnostic firms, and they exit at either of 2 points. The first exit is before commercialization. It's truly unique. It's incredible. This is technology someone wants to have. They buy it. Then you'll commercialize. The valuation actually goes down. And it will only go up again if the revenue starts to gain traction, because then you're measured by, well, how are you growing? And then there's sort of a magic number. It takes around 20 million or so, and then someone will decide to take you out. But when we invest, we look for companies that have the opportunity for both exits. If we don't think you have the opportunity for the first one, then we're more reluctant. You would like to at least think that this technology is so unique and so singular that someone is going to take you out just for the technology itself. There's a whole bunch of parameters around that. But I will also say that investing in diagnostics, or getting money if you're a company looking for diagnostic money, don't get discouraged. People have a hard time raising money in this space. It's not easy. You'll hear a lot of no's. And there are simply more companies searching for money than there are folks that want to invest in diagnostics. It's different than my perception is in the biotech space, where it may be actually the reverse. I'm not sure that it's true.
Just to add to that, the main reason why sort of pure diagnostics is challenging from a VC perspective is it's twofold. There's the regulation and there's the reimbursement challenge.
Yep.
On the regulation side, it's relatively, it's very confusing, but it's relatively loose compared to the biotech regulation. And of course, there's very little or no correlation between that getting a diagnostic approved and getting reimbursed, which is actually the biggest challenge.
That's very different.
Demonstrating clinical utility is really hard, and it's kind of vague. And the pricing as well. Our colleagues in the biotech session, they're price setters, right? CMS is not negotiating drug prices, and they can sort of set a value-based price, whereas in diagnostics it's the other way around, price takers. And it tends to be cost-based pricing. So I think there's a lot of sort of uncertainty at the moment around the coming election and what's going to happen. And I think that mainly applies to the other session. I think it applies less. It could actually be an opportunity for diagnostic companies.
I think that's right.
It's going to sort of level the playing field a little bit between biotech and diagnostics.
And it may even be that if there's enough pressure put there, the diagnostic will be more required. Let's face it. Right now, many diagnostics are the enemy of the pharmaceutical industry, because we will prevent people from actually getting a drug that they might not respond to. Right?
Yeah.
So I think those are great comments. Anything else anyone wants to add?
I would just add in, companion diagnostics is an area that I think is ripe for development. Genomic-related testing that can identify subpopulations in therapeutic trials for drug companies. Drug companies and other companies that play into different disease areas can benefit from partnering with diagnostic teams. So there's some opportunities there. We had a company in synovial fluid, joint infection and various other joint diseases. They got acquired. They had a strategic partner in Zimmer and got acquired by Zimmer. Zimmer makes joints. You wouldn't think of them as a firm that would be in the diagnostic world, but infection is the biggest problem with joints. You get a biofilm on an ankle or a hip, it's a nightmare. So it's a big problem for them, even though they really don't want to be in the diagnostic world. They need to be, because doing that well improves their overall business. And I suspect there are other either device companies, I know there are drug companies that can benefit from diagnostics. So those may be areas to kind of think about in terms of your business plan.
So I'd like to now move to a different topic, and this is the topic which I promised at the beginning. How do you get money out of these guys? So I'd like to ask each of the panelists to comment upon is, what are the attributes you're looking for in a company when they're sitting in front of you, pitching to you? What are the attributes that are going to make you nod your head and say, I'm going to go deeper, I might want to fund this? And by the way, you can even say, and one of the things where if it comes out of their mouths, you're going to just close your book, say no money from this. I'm going to start with David.
Yeah, so what we're looking for primarily is that technology, that science, that kernel of new wisdom, new knowledge that is kind of provides the foundation for why this company, this technology can do something new and differentiate, can disrupt what's out there today. So we're looking for disruption. And so that's what we're looking for. And if we don't hear it, if we hear like, you know, it's a little better than this, and it's a little cheaper than that, and that's not really very interesting to us. We want to enable something unique. That's what we're looking for. And we want to hear about that strong IP that's associated with that uniqueness that's going to protect it and keep other people from being able to copy it. And likewise, it's going to make somebody want to acquire it because it is so well protected that they can't, you know, copy it themselves if they find it attractive. So that's the main thing that we're looking for. And I guess the converse, you know, the flip point of that is that you can. I guess one thing that we look for, or we don't look for, is if you tell us that we can skim 5% of a market, like you got like a $10 billion market, and you say that, well, if I can just find 5% of that market, I've got a big company. And that's not really interesting to us because that doesn't tell us, you know, where your unique value proposition is. You've got to tell us where you can kind of go in with a very concise plan. You get a beachhead market which can take 50% share of that market, and that can be diligence. We can't diligence that you can take 5% of a really vast market. That doesn't really work. So I guess those are kind of two parts of that coin for
Yeah, in addition to that, especially I think relevant to diagnostic companies is the team, sort of a stage-appropriate team, and you know, especially important function in diagnostic companies is the commercial one, because it's a hard sell. You got to sell not just to physicians but to payers as well. So having somebody on the team that has done at least that piece before, carry the bag, so to speak. And can sort of navigate the regulatory and sort of reimbursement maze, being able to articulate how you're going to, tackle the market, having sort of a good strategy there, how you're going to sort of jump all those hoops. It's for diagnostic companies really is essential.
I like the phrase stage-specific team. So that means that in an early stage you don't need that person, right?
But you've got to. If you're raising your Series A and you don't have that person, you got to be aware that you need that person and you got to be looking for it.
So, although this question always sounds like the dating game, so what's your turnoffs? What if they say this to you, you say, no, walking away?
We're very patient and very understanding. And obviously it's going to be around that sort of the clarity or lack of clarity of the go-to-market strategy, especially. I mean, on diagnostic, the technology tends to be the easy part. I mean, it's not like there's less risk on the technology side than the science. If there's IP protection and all that, that's all good, but it's really how are you going to sort of commercialize this?
So very similar sort of must-haves for us: breakthrough technology, great IP protection, team. The other thing we really look for is I want to see in a team a group that has thought about everything that can go wrong. And I think the biggest mistake a lot of startup players make is they don't want to talk about what can go wrong because they think that's just negative and I need to sell the story. Well, if you've got a breakthrough technology, you've got really good IP, you've got a team with experience, and it's a big potential addressable market. we see the upside real easy. We don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about that. Then we spend 90% of our energy thinking about everything that can go wrong. And if a team has thought about all those things and has tried to address those risks, that's positively impactful for us. And in diagnostics, to Wouter's point, our view is that one of the biggest things that can go wrong is getting to market. You can have a great breakthrough product, use new technology, good IP protection. Well, you still have to convince key opinion leaders, practitioners. I mean, it's a giant sales job. So, how do you develop a sales and marketing organization that can sell your one product or maybe a couple as you develop them? If you haven't thought about that, then to me, you haven't thought about one of the biggest risks inherent in the business. So you have to think about it. It's probably some sort of strategic partner distribution element in the diagnostic play. But then, thinking about the other things that can go wrong. I don't think you will negatively bias an investor by bringing up potential problems. You'll impress them. I don't know if you guys agree.
You stole my thunder. I mean, it's the exact, no, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So let me start with some of my turnoffs. If you spend, let's say we have this half an hour with one another, you spend 15 minutes of it talking about the market size. I've lost attention, I'm falling asleep. If you then dive into, you're an early stage company, you don't even have a prototype, yet you have a multi-page spreadsheet of a business plan with revenues, et cetera. The only thing I know about that business plan is that it's wrong. I don't know how it's wrong, but I know it's wrong. What you want to see is a very detailed use of funds. And the use of funds gets you to getting rid of the risks that you've identified. Here are the risks in my plan. Because we're investing in early stage, there's a bunch of risks. There's technical risks, there's clinical risks, there's the clinical trial risks. There's a ton of risks. So I'm totally behind that. I get impressed when someone says, okay, so here are the little stones in our way. We know where they are, we know how big they are, and here's how we're going to not only find them, but move them aside. That's an incredible, I mean, we feel good about that. A great CEO of not only diagnostic companies, but any companies, I think has to have professional schizophrenia. The professional schizophrenia is, on the one hand, they can look at you and impart to you a compelling vision. Why this company is the most brilliant company that has ever set foot on the planet. It is going to conquer this entire domain. It's going to dominate. It's going to be worth billions. And then in a nanosecond, you can shift to the most paranoid individual ever, with every single detail keeping you awake at night, saying, but this could go wrong, and that could go wrong, and oh my God, this is never going to work. And we have to get this problem up. And you must be able to have those two personalities simultaneously in you in order to drive the company. And I couldn't agree more. It's a great statement.
Well, one thing I forgot to ask, and I just want to mention it, the thing that we look for as well, I mean, which is maybe different from you guys, because we're a little bit later, is data. At the minimum, we want to see sort of analytical validation, if possible, clinical validation, and sort of, then you can start thinking about the actual clinical utility piece.
Right. Now I'm going to ask a question we did not prepare for. So all those questions I just asked, I told them I was going to ask. Here's the way I'm going to tell you. It's a secret. It's the hardest question of all. David, pick one. How do you approach valuation?
Valuation.
I love that Dad's. I do this every time we have the little sessions out here, and they say, well, how much are you looking for? They'll say, I'm looking for $8 million or something. And I'll be writing, and they'll say, at what value? No one wants to be the first to speak. So how do you address the valuation question?
As late as possible.
Good. No, but seriously, I mean, Talk about valuations and diagnostics. Talk about what you're seeing. Are there trends? Are there areas where you say this value is high, this is low? How do you deal with the valuation question?
Well, as you recall, we don't normally talk to diagnostic companies, right? So we're talking to tools companies.
Good. How do you evaluate the tools company?
And so, yeah, once you go through all of the diligence and all, and make sure you're ready to make an investment, right? You want to basically put a term sheet in front of them. Then basically you're talking about, okay, how much money are you going to take? And then you look at, okay, here we've got a founder. Founder needs a certain amount of shares, a certain amount of percentage. And we know what we want. We want to get about 20 to 25% of the company. And so you kind of triangulate around a number that's going to work, that we can get the share we want. And we're also, if we want a syndicate, we very, very rarely are going to enter into a company by ourselves. I mean, God forbid, that we're like the only company, the only firm that, supporting the company going forward because of all the things that go wrong, right? And so you need a syndicate. And so you think, okay, well, I need to have shares available for my syndicate as well. And so you kind of come up to what the investors need and what the insiders need, and then you come up to a number. That's usually how it works. And if their ask is too much, then you look at the end valuation, then you scratch your head and you say, well, you're asking too much because you still have to be able to raise a Series B. Because every round that you're raising, it's always about the next round. It's not about the round you're actually raising.
That's right.
It's about the next round. And so if the valuation ended up too high at the end of your A round, then you can't attract B at a step up, because if you can't get a step up, then why are you investing in this round in the first place? So it's all those things that you're considering.
I think that's, by the way, a great comment that most companies aren't thinking about. They're not thinking about the fact that if the valuation is too high on the A, they won't be able to get the B.
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to be miserable, right?
Right.
How do you approach it?
Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated at all. I mean, it's all, it's supply and demand to some extent. That hasn't been mentioned. We track what other companies are raising. It gives us sort of a benchmark what we sort of could ask for. Obviously, if we lead, we set the price, and companies that come to us with a set valuation that doesn't make any sense. We set the price, and we want to keep the insiders happy, as David mentioned, and we want to get our ownership stake, and it's going to be realistic, for the stage, right?
What's your rule of thumb for what a CEO should be owning?
At the end of A or?
At the end of, say, a B.
B. So A is easier. B's a little harder.
That's right. That's why I asked you for the B. I'm trying to learn here too.
Yeah. You mean it can be so it's a founder CEO versus a CEO you bring in, right? So
those are different. So let's say a founder CEO.
Those are two different things. And in the founder CEO, you assume they're probably taking a little bit less cash, right? Because they have the equity. Yeah. And so all those things kind of go into play. But I don't know, at the end of a B, maybe somewhere in the 6 or 7% or 8. It just depends on the opportunity, right?
Yeah,
every opportunity is different.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's hard to answer with a specific number. The thing I would add, kind of leveraging off of what David said, about not having too high a valuation in any one round. I look at it like you're climbing a mountain, right? The top of the mountain is the exit, and each round is being priced. It's like a base camp on the mountain, right? To have like a good situation, everybody has to be happy at each step of the way. If you have a seed round, you raise it from a bunch of angels who price some crazy price, you're not going to be able to raise your A round. Not only will it be a down round, which is, not going to be good because you'll have pissed off seed investors. Now you'll have seed investors and A investors that are not happy with each other. But you might not even get the A round because A round people don't want to look at you because they look at it and say, oh, you raised seed, you raised $1 million or $2 million a seed at a 15 pre, it's a 17 post. I don't even want to bother with this because it's going to be a mess. So, you can't go like this. You got to go each step of the way. It's got to go higher and higher. And then, ultimately you get an exit and it's higher than the last round and everybody wins, everybody's happy. So it's really important to think about, look, if we build this thing we think we can build, what's it going to be worth at an exit? How much will somebody pay for it? My background before this was corporate development and mostly buying companies. So, think about the buyers. Who's your buyer? It's normally not an IPO. And what are they going to pay for it? And then, okay, can I make a climb to get to that point? And at every step of the way, it's got to be higher than the last. And I've got to have raised enough capital so that I can accomplish what I need to. So, I think the situations we're in that work like that, management tends to do well. They might not end up with that much of it at the end, but they have a nice exit for them.
Yeah. And a good experience.
And a good experience, yeah. And then they can go on and do the next thing because they got a lot of happy investors.
So I'm just going to dovetail my comments on the last part of yours. In a previous life, I worked for a big multinational and helped acquire about 12 billion euro or so worth of companies. And in those investment committee meetings where you're sitting looking to buy a company, there are two people who are always, in some ways, the enemy of the sponsor in the company. There is the chief financial officer who is basically saying, show me the revenue synergies, show me the cost synergies, show me what this looks like, what is the IRR on it, et cetera, et cetera. How is it dilutive or accretive to our earnings next quarter? What will our investors say? What will our stock do? Right? So these are all the questions. Those are the hard, nasty things. And they're putting in some model with some hurdle rates, et cetera. The other person who is violently against the acquisition, no matter what it is typically the head of R&D. Because the head of R&D is sitting there in the room saying, if you gave me 1/10 of that money, I could develop that same thing, and mine would be better, and be faster, and be cheaper. And those guys are idiots, and here's why. So, you need to actually think in your mind about that conversation that's going to happen later about your company, because that conversation is going to happen. As I said, I participated in 50 or 60 of them, and they all went the same way. And if you think about that realistically, it may change that stream of values that you hope to achieve along the road. So in any case, unless there are other comments you want to make, I'm about to open this up to questions. That work? Questions from the audience?
Thank you, this was awesome, guys. From a pre-commercial, pre-revenue, validated, maybe analytically or in some sort of R&D capacity, validated set of science with IP protection, what kind of appetite are you guys seeing from an M&A standpoint for that kind of deal? You mentioned that as being kind of one of the two paths, kind of pre-commercial exit. How early are we seeing deals?
So I'll give a quick answer from my side, but I'd love to hear the comments from my colleagues. It depends on how damn special you are. I mean, if again, I think you said it, David. If it's this is 50% cheaper, 30% faster, so cool. I mean, they're not going to do it, right? If it's holy crap, is this disruptive? This could totally upend my business. Then you got a shot. Now there aren't a lot of them per year, right? There's just not a lot. But you have a shot. But you better be really disruptive.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because the other scenario is you have to show revenue. And I think you must be talking to the same investment banker because they always say 20 million.
It's a weird number, right?
You have
to hit 20 million.
Then the corporate buyers will show up. Apparently they don't show up at 19.
Yes.
I guess the investment bankers don't show up at 19.
That's also true. You can't write their checks. That answer your question?
Yeah.
We had a, yes.
Yeah, so from a generating revenue perspective, company says, oh, there's this CPT code I can use, or maybe I enable this DRG code to be upgraded for like a complication or whatever, or maybe the patient will pay out of pocket. What revenue models are you seeing the most success in for diagnostics within the healthcare ecosystem? And kind of your thoughts on that.
Oh, I'm going to put a wrinkle into that question. I'm not going to answer it. These guys are. And let's assume you have a CLIA model. Talk about those. Oh yeah, that was a great question. This is why I like being moderator. If I can't answer, I just throw it. Go.
There's something to be said for the DRG model. It's a lot simpler. You know, that's one that we like. Ask me to pick one, I would go for that one.
Yeah, I would say, you know, either the CPT or DRG. You know, if you can get reimbursement, that's good. You know, self-pay is really tough, from my perspective anyway. I mean, like, we don't do anything that's self-pay. I mean, the American public kind of expects most of their medical stuff to be taken care of. There are some decent businesses that can, I think, be made on a self-pay basis.
Absolutely.
But it's hard for investors to take that risk in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think part of it, I always thought it was just us. We won't do that, principally because it requires direct-to-consumer marketing. It's just not something we know well. You know, we just can't help you, can't give you advice to how to do that, so we just tend to stay away from it.
Yeah, we don't invest in consumer products. We don't run the focus group, so I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah, we don't know it either, but you know, there might be like investors, there's investors who invest in a lot of consumer products that are anything from beverages to food to, you know, clothes to you name it. They might be interested in something that's self-pay.
Yeah.
Because they know that world.
Other questions?
So there's this maybe a subset of the total diagnostic market. You've got point of care diagnostics where people tend to talk about two value propositions. The one they talk about the most is speed. I'm going to do it faster. And the other one that they don't talk about as much is sort of, well, I'm going to change the economics. I'm going to let somebody else charge for that test. You know, like a doctor's office or something. Do you see both those models, and do you think one is better than another from a go-to-market perspective?
Yes, we see both. I was going to say, I think it's, I mean, the challenge is always with the point of care devices. I mean, you gotta be both, you know, very fast and very cheap. And if you want to sell it to the doctor, you're going to be taking up space. So if it doesn't give you an answer in 15 minutes, it's not really the point of care. You might as well have it with a benchtop or desktop system, and then you're going to take up space, and you've got to convince the physician that there may be something in it for them. So that's, you know, to your second point, that's just definitely, there's some attraction there.
We hear a lot about point of care. I mean, it is a hot topic. You know, you talk to all the big diagnostic companies, as you probably know, they're all thinking about this because they're all kind of worrying about where the world's going to be in 10 years. You know, so I think if you have a technology that enables point of care where it isn't enabled today, it's of interest because everybody's looking at where this puck's going, you know. Yet, the flip side is, it's kind of not that real yet, you know?
It's like CTCs, not that real.
Right, yeah. Like everybody's talking about
That's a great one.
Well, yeah, we've been hearing about, you know, liquid biopsy and circulating tumor cells and, you know, cell-free DNA, but it's like, it's not, you know, so there's lots of hype, but
it's really hard.
Yeah, but point of care, I absolutely believe it's going to be huge. And if you've got a technology that has the potential for that, you should definitely play it up because investors know that the buyers of the, you know, companies, the big DX firms, are going to be thinking about that. And even if it's not real by the time you exit, they'll be thinking, well, you know, that can add value down the road, so it's kind of like icing on the cake for them.
Since I started Graybird, I had said that the one thing I'm not going to invest in, no matter what, is, you know, point-of-care molecular testing technology. There's just too many of them. How the hell do I decide? There's a zillion of them. So 2 weeks ago, we invested in a point-of-care. And, shoot me. But, certainly consistency is not one of my strengths. But the thing that we looked for a bunch of criteria to be met simultaneously. One is speed. I think speed is huge. And 15 minutes. I don't know who said 15 minutes, but that's the number. I mean, if it's not faster than 15 minutes, forget it. It's no longer point of care. You've moved on. But just as important is the ability for someone who has no understanding whatsoever about how this test works to run. As a really, really dumb, simple thing. If you have to calibrate, normalize, interpret, forget it. Won't touch the thing. And we also looked at a point-of-care technology that was scalable across a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, because if someone comes to me and says, I got this point-of-care for urinary tract infections, I can count 80 of them. There's at least 80 companies developing a point-of-care device for urinary tract infection. Forget it. So it's really hard. And we may have just made a mistake. I don't know. I totally agree. It's going to be huge. Making the right bet from our standpoint is really hard. We took 3 years of looking before we made one.
Yeah, you talk about turnoffs, like point of care, that's a turnoff for us.
Yeah.
And if you say it, you better be really quick with it, it's really fast, because otherwise you already lost us.
I did the same thing. I just said, if anyone comes to me and says point of care, go away. And I said that to the company we ultimately invested in. I said, go away. And they said, no, don't tell me to go away.
Yeah.
And
Really
by the way,
persistent.
persistence is important.
But if you have something that works in a lab, and it can be point of care someday,
that's
then
okay.
it's kind of like, we like the cake. Icing's fine too,
Right. Dorothy, I think we have one more minute. Any last question?
Founder CEO share at Series A. You didn't mention that. You said Series B, 6-7%. What's the norm for Series A?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. Stupid?
Well, I said it's easier.
I can tell you what I do. I probably do the same thing I think David does. I look at the B and I interpolate backwards. I said, okay, we want to make sure that after the B, they're left with enough to keep them interested, if I like them. And then say, okay, so how much dilution will they get after the B? And that's what their A should be. I have no problem with a founder having, a big chunk of the company at the end of the day, depending upon what the B hurdle looks like.
Yeah, it's not what we solve for, We really solve for, say, how much capital are they going to need over time to exit? How many rounds? What sizes, what are the pre and post of each of those, and how do I go up and up and up?
Yeah.
And then, you back into what's your seed or A gonna pre-money have to be, and whatever the founders end up with, they end up with,
Good.
Thank you.
We are on time. Resi scorekeeper, are we on time?
Just right, yeah.
Awesome. Good. Then I'd like to hear a round of applause for my coach.